Should pastors be rich? Should they even take a salary at all? And if so, how much money should they make? That's our topic today on The Beat. Hey everyone, my name is Alan Parr. Thank you all so much for tuning into The Beat. Today we're answering the question, should pastors be rich? We see pastors owning and flying private jets, sometimes owning up to 10 different cars, wearing extravagant, flashy clothing. And so the question we want to ask today is this of God? And so as always, on this channel, we go back to what the Bible says, and I want to take a look at what does the Old Testament have to say about this, what does the New Testament have to say, and then what does this mean for us today? So first of all, what does the Old Testament have to say? Well, in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel was made up or comprised of 12 tribes. And one of those tribes was the tribe of Levi, and it was their responsibility to serve as priests at the tabernacle and later on at the temple. And so every time somebody would offer a sacrifice for their sin, these people were the ones that would take care of the sacrifice. And as a result of that, their work was never done, and so they could not work other jobs like the other 11 tribes could. So what God said is, I'm going to take the tithes of the other 11 tribes and use those to support the tribe of Levi, which could not work regular jobs. So from this verse and many others in the Old Testament, it is clear that those who dedicate their lives to God's work should not have to work regular jobs, but rather should be financially supported by those that do. Now, the New Testament is much clearer on this issue than the Old Testament. First of all, Paul says that those who preach the gospel should make their living on the gospel. Elsewhere, Paul says that if we have sown spiritual fruit among you, should we not reap material harvest as well? In other words, he's saying, hey, how can you put a price on the eternal investments that we are sowing into your life? And so because we are making eternal investments in your life, then naturally we should receive material reward. Elsewhere, Paul borrows from the Old Testament verse which says, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading grain, for the worker deserves his wages. So this needs some explanation. So a muzzle was something that they would put on the mouth of an ox to keep it from eating the grain that it was treading out. And so Paul was basically saying, hey, do not put this muzzle on preachers and pastors while they are doing the very work for you. Now, on the flip side, it also says that those who aspire to be ministers or pastors should first of all be free from the love of money, but also it says that those who love money or those who desire to be rich will fall into many temptations. In other words, a minister who elevates prosperity and flaunts all of their material possessions in front of people, first of all, it is a violation of the scriptures that I just read. Second of all, it can make those who do not have feel as though they are second-class Christians because they're not experiencing this abundant prosperity. And then third of all, it is also a poor representation of a minister. Not only that, it incites or tempts people to chase after money and possessions. And then finally, it can be perceived as a mismanagement of people's hard-earned money. Finally, what does this mean today? Well, the original question was, should pastors be rich? Well, the Bible actually doesn't set any minimum or maximum salary for pastors to make. With that being said, I think we need to be very careful about not sending the subtle message that pastors should be poor and that pastors don't deserve to experience and enjoy a certain level of prosperity, particularly in situations where that man has gone to school and has more schooling than many people in corporate America. I would also make the argument that they work harder than many people in corporate America, having to wear the hats of a CEO, a pastor, a counselor, and in some cases a father. And so the real question that we really should be asking is not so much should a pastor be rich or how much money should a pastor make, but what are they doing with the money that God has given them? So if a minister makes $1 million and they take half of that and invest it back into their ministry, or they give a certain portion away to the poor, those who are less fortunate, they're leaving a legacy for their children and their children's children, they're setting aside some for their retirement. If they're doing all of this and at the same time living a humble life, not flashing their riches in front of other people, then I see no real reason why God should not continue to bless that man or woman of God as long as they are a good steward with what God has blessed them with. So guys, I know this is a controversial subject. When we look out in the society today, we see so many ministers and pastors who are blowing up and making a ton of money. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Hey, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time on The Beat.